We're now live.
Thank you.
Thank you. But to just give it about another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll make a start. We're just going 6, isn't it?
All the members are here now, Claire. Councillor Metcalfe did it, apart from Councillor Evans, of course.
Yeah, apart from Councillor Evans, yeah. Okay then, if everyone's here and it's now being publicly available, the meeting, we'll make a start. First of all, as you can see, you've got me tonight to chair the meeting because Councillor Evans is trying to face an unexpected flooding in his basement. I think it's his basement, and his office is above that, so he's trying to find the source of it and rescue all his things. So he's given his apologies today. Obviously needs to concentrate on sorting that out. So please bear with me. If I miss people indicating, if they can indicate by raising the hand, I'd appreciate that. I'll get some reminders if people are wanting to speak. So if we can start off by, obviously I think we've covered that, but substitutes nominated for this meeting and apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, you've covered that. There's just Councillor Evans' apologies and no substitutes.
That's right, and everyone else is present. Thank you. Admission of the public, which is now, we're now online with that. Minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of December to be agreed as a correct record and signed by the Chair. I've looked through those minutes, those detailed minutes, quite a lot of them from the last meeting. I don't have anything particular to raise in them. Anyone else has any matters they wish, anything to change? Is it a correct record? Are we all happy it's a correct record? Yeah. Any matters arising from anyone on those minutes? Yes, Councillor Cook indicating, is it? Councillor Cook, are you indicating?
No, I wasn't actually indicating. No, sorry, I was leaning over to get a pen.
Okay, thanks. Just wanted to make sure. Yeah, I didn't miss anyone. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Okay, no matters arising being raised. So can we all agree on those minutes, please, as a correct record? Thank you. Right, we move on then to the half-year corporate performance report submitted by Jez. I think this is, I'm right, this has already been to Cabinet, and now we as SNP Scrutiny Board are now picking it up. And I don't think there was anything particularly minuted on this from Cabinet, other than obviously discussing it and accepting the report. I think that's right. I don't think there's anything that they particularly flagged up on.
So, yeah, that's correct, Chair.
Right. Now, Jez, do you want to come in on it and just run us through some important points?
I will do. Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, as you said, it's the half-year performance report that went to Cabinet in December. Sort of the salient points to pick up from this. Obviously, this year what we've done is we're moving towards a benchmarking framework that sits around the SIPFA standard, so and statistical neighbours as well as Yorkshire and Humber and all England councils. So that gives us a bit more robustness and a bit more statistical credibility, shall we say, in terms of some of the benchmarking against other local authorities. There are 19 SKPIs, and what we've picked out within the Cabinet report are three of the three SKPIs which were red, and the RAG rating shows where they are in terms of the quartile, whether the top quartile, bottom quartile, or obviously in the middle. So there are reports, or there's details on highway maintenance and some of the work and some of the budgeting work that's ongoing in order to try and increase that with a WICA bid, so the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement bid. There's also detail around total crime. It's a bit of a sort of a perennial SKPI, but obviously there's detail in there in terms of how we compare across the West Yorkshire Police and Crime Commissioner estate and different types of crime, and in particular around some of the work and some of the projects initiatives that have been done for safety of women, such as the Ask for Angela scheme and the mobile safety pod and the funding associated with that, and also some of the work that's been done in the parks with the community safety partnership, specifically looking, like I say, at the vulnerability and the threat posed to women on the evening. There's also work detailing there around housing and some of the work in terms of a review that's ongoing, looking at planning services, and obviously talks around where the position of the local plan is and how it's approached its closing stages, and some details and some examples of supply that's actually, that is in situ across the borough, and the types of accommodation and the range of ownership models that have been afforded. And then finally, like I said, there is within the exception report, within the appendices, we bring out some of the exceptions in terms of some of the other SKPIs or supporting measures, and we talk around, because obviously with the post-pandemic recovery is obviously the key theme, and youth unemployment, employability just in general is obviously now a key focus. So we've introduced claimant count and youth unemployment measures within the suite of super key performance indicators, and it talks there around, whilst we at the particular point at half yearly we were above regional and England averages for claimant count and youth unemployment, that gap is reducing and we're continuing to see that gap. So it is a pleasing measure, a pleasing trajectory in that sense. And then finally, we talk around the positive news around long-term placement stability in children's social care, and how that's now above the service target and is at a level that not seen for some number of years, and some of the reasons for the stability. The pandemic and the lockdown actually encouraged some stability in homes without some of that disruption with families and schools, and then also finally around the permanent admissions to care homes, with early evidence suggesting that this may be increased to obviously the discharge rate from hospital, and also some of the supply and sustainability of the care model, the care accommodation across the borough. So I'll pass over to obviously to yourselves in order to discuss any further items. If there is detail, I think we said in the emails, I can take those back and get follow-up questions if I'm unable to answer in terms of the framework itself.
Okay, thank you very much, Jess, for that. As usual, it's quite a detailed report with a lot of information there on the various updates there. I understand Councillor Dacre wants to come in after members' questions. Can I just see if there's any questions? Yeah, Councillor Press. Councillor Press.
Yeah, there are a couple of things actually that I just wanted to mention. I noticed on the crime, I'm sorry, I'm looking at this on my phone, therefore I'm having to look at very, very small print, so just bear with me. On the 4.4.2, there's a reference to sexual offences. 4.4.2, total crime. It is worth noting in respect of sexual offences, the Calderdale district continues to have the highest outcome for sexual offences in the whole of West Yorkshire. I wasn't quite sure, does that mean, it sounds like, is it a good thing? Or I'm guessing that's a good thing. Because we're talking about outcomes, we're talking about detection of sexual offences. So actually, when I first read that, I thought, and then I realised I am correct in thinking that is actually a good thing. But what I would say is that there has been a lot of concern, and particularly in places like Hepton Bridge and Tomodon recently, particularly in relation to women's safety. So I'm glad to see the initiatives that are being rolled out to tackle that, particularly the funding for safety of women at night, SWAN, the Ask for Angela scheme, all those things are good things. But I was wondering, I also wanted to mention on the claimant rate, just because people aren't claiming benefits doesn't mean that they're not poor. So I'm a member of something. I co-run a food bank in Tomden with other volunteers, and I go to meetings with other people in that voluntary and third sector stuff. And it's quite clear that the demand for food banks, in particular across Calderdale, is actually rising. So a lot of the people who are actually in poverty are actually in work. And I'm not sure that the claimant thing is a little bit outmoded in a way, because the claimant is the worst. It's the worst end of the stick. But actually, there are people in work who are earning pretty much below the breadline wages and have to top that up with universal credit, which of course universal credit, the top up that there was during the pandemic has gone. So that's £20, gone on people's budgets. So I'd be interested in a bit more drilling down on that. And it's probably that I'm not looking hard enough, but are there harder and are there any more specific figures you've got on the housing?
There's quite a lot in those comments. Do you want to come back now, Jez, or
well, yes, I will if I can, Chair. First of all, in terms of the detection rate, that is a positive statement from the police in terms of, like I said, the action that is being taken in order to address those instances and those crimes that are reported. In terms of the food bank and the claimant count, we are actually we're introducing another super key performance indicator that looks at the sort of, I suppose, the health of the voluntary and community sector, the VCS, the third sector, and at the third quarter and obviously year end, we will have a new measure that looks at, and a benchmarkable measure that looks at the number of voluntary organisations as a rate of population of as an SKPI. Now that's just like all SKPIs are. That's just one indicator that then, as you say, allows us then to identify where we need to drill down. So that may give us set the temperature in terms of the health of the voluntary and community sector within the borough, and may allow us to sort of do some more drilling down or further investigation if we feel it's necessary. What was the last point? Sorry.
Housing. It would have been nice to have had some more information.
So again, the SKPI is just one of the 19, 20 top level reports. Underpinning all of the council's corporate performance framework are a number of other supporting measures, and there are a range of housing measures that sit underneath that. So it isn't just the one measure that would test the temperature of the state of housing across the borough. There are a number of other measures that are reported by exception to TOG and to corporate leadership team and to cabinet, and also reported to the directorate management teams. And we can give you a list of what those other housing specific key performance measures are if Scrutiny wants that.
Okay, thanks, Jez. With three other members wishing to speak on this, Councillor Taylor, I think, was the next one.
It was a question, actually. Thank you, Chairman. It was the same minute, if you like, over the page. Oh, could I congratulate whoever has numbered the pages all the way through from start to finish? This is what they used to do. This is what they used to do at the West Yorkshire Police Authority. So you might end up with, could members turn to page 98? But at least you went straight on to 98, But page 18 at the top, it's about violent crime. My only question here is, whenever we get people in the house and having drink, i.e. World Cup, European Championships, domestic abuse claims or reports seem to go up. Did the knockdown not affect this at all?
Sorry.
Jez?
Yeah, I'd need to get a specific response on that. I don't want to give a comment. I think anecdotally, there was some increase, obviously, with people locked down and issues around that, but I don't want to make a judgment on that. So I can get their response for that, and we can feed that back into Scrutiny. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sutherland.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jez, for the report. I particularly found it valuable the statistics she'd included about youth unemployment and about the positive trend there. I look forward to next time we've got this report, perhaps seeing that gap entirely closed or well on its way. If it's not, I think it would well be worth the subject of us discussing, or at least some scrutiny panel drilling down a bit deeper into understanding why we've got vacancies, but we still have, an above average unemployment rate for young people. I wanted to pick up on housing, not to go back over what's already been discussed. Housing is one that's often been a challenge, and we're often being placed in the red for a number of reasons, but there's a number of challenges that pull it either way. And I noticed in one of the scrutiny panel's comments on the budget, there was a suggestion of winding up the housing company as a means of a budget saving, and just how, as a council, we have so many pulls on us. It's hard sometimes to find that resource, as well as not having the powers to deliver on housing. So when we're looking at the issues of where we could improve, and we're looking at our statistical neighbours, and particularly the ones up at the top, for example, Doncaster, which has got almost 5 times as much sort of development as a proportion of its requirement compared to say ourselves. Do we pick apart what are the characteristics that makes a Doncaster, for example, successfully able to do that? I'm sure there's things like the local plan, it might be land availability, but there might also be some other things that we could pick up and learn from. And do we do that investigation into what's working for these other areas?
Mark on that, Chair?
Yes, Jez.
Yeah, we do, is in the short answer. For all our key performance, all our exception reports, and when we report these details through, the role of the performance officer is, hence why we have the benchmarking groups, and you may see in some of the exception reports later on, it talks around, we will engage with the best in, let's call them the best in breed, to see what lessons can be learned, what opportunities there are there. We've done that on a number of areas in terms of like climate change, and certainly around sport and waste. So it is part of the brief of the role to do that. But yeah, like I said, we can certainly always feed that back through if there's something that is distinct. I think I know when we looked at Trafford one time around some of the work and the economic makeup of certain boroughs, whilst they may be benchmarkable and statistically relevant, there are other factors that affect what one borough is able to do, perhaps in an area that we aren't. I know, like I said, Trafford when we were looking at childhood obesity and fitness and people's ability to engage in sport, there were obviously opportunities in Trafford that there weren't in Calderdale. But yeah, we do look at others in terms of like learning from benchmarking. But again, we can always bolster that in terms of the reports and the exception reports wherever we can.
And I just add, I'm sure Councillor Sutherland mentioned land availability. I'm sure that has to be a factor, and always probably has been somewhat a factor when we compare the topography of Calderdale as against places like Doncaster and Wakefield that have successfully built quite a number of houses. So I'm sure it has a real factor there, amongst other factors that's been mentioned. Next on the list I've got is Councillor Megan Swift.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say at the beginning of this that I don't care much whether we're higher or lower than Doncaster or anywhere else. I'm more concerned about that we're doing a good job with the young people who are struggling at the moment. And I know that goes to Councillor Sutherland as well. Nod your head. That's it. It does, you see. Yeah. I mean, when you look at the houses around, when you think of the effort and the time Jenny Lynn and others put into the houses are building near the school at the moment, Beach Hill. I have no idea from start to finish how long it took, but it always seems to have been there in the background. And it's fantastic to see some houses being built now and the towers going down. So that's that. I want to talk, though, again about youth unemployment. I don't want to be so high, and I don't understand why. I understand why people might not claim, because people have heard horrific stories of going and signing on. And going back about 6 or 7 years, I went and sat in. I wouldn't have wanted, if I'd have been a young kid, I wouldn't have wanted to go because they were nasty to them. Not just not nice, they were nasty. So, you know, you've got to be middle-aged at least to get the treatment. And I just think we've got to find a way of working with these young people. And I know a lot's done already, but we need some more at the moment. Okay. Oh, can I just ask, sorry, have we got the inspection results from, is it there or is it just the, come on, the youth, what is it? The legally sounding one, got its name. Right, well, obviously no.
It's just.
I'm still, yeah, I don't have that. I don't have that that judgment to confirm here, and that probably would come through the appropriate channels through Julie and the corporate leadership team. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Swift. Councillor Cook. Councillor Cook, on mute. You're on mute at the moment.
There we go. Thanks. Yeah, sorry, couldn't get myself off mute there. So yeah, just looking at the SKPIs, particularly highway maintenance. It's mentioning that 4% of the borough's classified road network requires repairs. Do you have any further details on what constitutes repairs in that respect? Does that include potholes, you know? Sorry, does that include potholes? Are you aware? So do you want to ask all my questions first, or do you want to answer that one?
Well, I don't have the specific schema of what repairs is, but I would imagine potholes is included within that. It talks about general maintenance. So again, our highways colleagues could confirm what the actual full scope of repairs is, but I would certainly almost imagine that potholes and surface carriageway resurfacing and other repairs to the carriageway are included within that. But
is that figure correct then? Because 4% looks very low. I think, you know, especially when you're driving around the roads, there seems to be so many that require. I mean, if that figure does include potholes, I would suggest the figure's a lot higher than 4% of the road network. You know, that's why I probably need to clarify that. Is there any way we could get some clarification on that figure?
Yeah. That figure is accurate. That figure is carried out as a result of inspections of the highway, automated inspections. But we can confirm what the methodology that's been used in order to confirm that figure.
Yeah, because it's in the report. It makes it look as if that's a fairly respectable figure, but basically it does also show that. It says an improvement of 1% would see the borough enter the top half of local authority. So presumably at the minute we're in the bottom half. So I just wondered if you knew what plans were in place to improve that figure from 4%. You know, it says an improvement of 1% would see. Do you have that information, Jez, or do we need to get that?
Just driving around, Councillor Cook, I do see a lot of potholes. It's got paint, you know, marked up as though they've been inspected, and they're probably hopefully in the next programme to be dealt with. I'm not sure if we've got all the full. It'll be from April, the next programme, I assume, and I'm not sure if all the funding and different elements of the funding's in place yet for the next financial year. But I do see quite a lot marked up.
Yeah. Well, I would just suggest we need to look at that more, because I think there's certainly, to my mind, there's a lot of people who complain about the road surfaces. At least there's certainly
Councillor Dacre or Councillor Swift just any comments on that when we've taken all the questions.
Yeah, we can maybe ask them on that. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So, sorry, just moving a little bit further down to a question about housing, and it just mentions that the local plan will unlock sort of the borough's housing requirements. But it does also mention in there that a review was being carried out about the planning services, council planning services. Now, I noticed this report was presented on the 6th of December. And since then, we've had the planning peer review as well, which has basically highlighted that the planning department and the council isn't fit for purpose. Or the way it stands at the minute, it's not really capable of delivering the local plan because it's not staffed correctly. They haven't got the resources to do that. So I wanted to ask maybe a question for, council leader Tim Swift. If the local plan is passed in its current form, which we'll know later this year, is the council going to even be able to deliver it? Because it seems like the planning department isn't ready for that. I know there's budget proposals there to give them the money they need, but is it going to be ready in time? This is the problem. So this report is highlighting a number of difficulties that the council's got. If you really look into it and look deeply into it, so could I get some answers on that as well, please?
Okay, thank you. I think taking all the questions that members have flagged up. Councillor Dacre, do you want to come back? I know Councillor Swift's wanting to come in as well.
I can, if you want, because I was going. Well, yes, I'll speak, and then obviously if there's anything Councillor Swift wants to say after that. Well, really, just to start on the last item, I mean, I'm pleased that Councillor Cook did mention this because, of course, indeed, there is a proposal for investment in the Cabinet consultation booklet in relation to planning. And that is precisely to ensure that the planning department is fit for purpose as we go forward, both to ensure that general applications are dealt with in a timely fashion, that enforcement is properly dealt with, again, in a timely fashion, and also to ensure that if the plan is approved, the department is in a adequate position in order to be able to deal with the huge increase in business that's going to bring. So that's precisely the reason for those proposals. And it was an extremely thorough review, wasn't comfortable to read, and but we do believe that the steps that are proposed in the budget will enable the department to turn its performance around and deal with the local plan. Just again, going backwards, really on things that have been discussed in relation to potholes. Yes, that's, I think, part of general maintenance that would be covered here. And I'd just like to reassure Councillor Cook that my understanding is that there's a set way in which this is done. That's how local authorities can measure themselves against one another, because they'll be measuring it in the same way. And whilst I appreciate that it might seem that there's a lot of potholes, the surface area of those potholes compared to the length of the road network is obviously very small indeed, because there's a large road network. So if you look at it in that way, you can see why that figure might be correct, even though you might see a lot of potholes. And of course, as Councillor Metcalfe has mentioned, there is a regular programme of surveying the roads and trying to take immediate action to rectify potholes that have appeared. And we're hoping to improve on that in the way in which we do that and make those repairs more lasting in the future. Again, just if I could say, going backwards a bit more to the matters raised by Councillor Swift, as she says, there's a huge amount of work going on at West Yorkshire level and at Calderdale, trying to deal with, amongst other things, those young people who are not in training or employment or education. And to some extent, it does show how much depends on what measure you use, because as another part of the role, I go to the West Yorkshire Employment and Skills Committee, and they provided us with a graph of not in employment, education or training, which showed us to be the lowest in West Yorkshire. So I looked at this and thought, well, that's a bit strange. But in fact, of course, it's because they're measuring 16 to 17-year-olds, whereas our measure is 18 to 24. So there are some things that it's not just about how you measure against one another, but statistics only tell you what that particular statistic tells you. So there is some good news there. I think that's probably all that I wanted to cover, unless there were any other particular questions anybody wanted me to deal with.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Dacre. Any questions to Councillor Dacre? No, thank you. I noticed Jez has put some some things up in chat on the mythology and things on chat for us to look at. Councillor, it's Tim Swift.
No, sorry, Chair. Could I come in before Tim?
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
I couldn't get everything to work for me to talk.
You must have just flagged up. I've just seen you flag. Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask Sylvia? Oh, Councillor Dacre even. We talked. A couple of people have already talked about road maintenance, etc. And if my memory serves me right from reading it, it's down as low. I would have thought road maintenance should be a high, but it certainly isn't on the set of papers I've got.
Can I come
I don't
in,
know
Chair?
if Jeff wants to answer that.
Yeah. The specific indicator is the proportion of the road of the network requiring maintenance. So on that particular measure, a low figure is a positive outcome, yeah, as opposed to a high figure.
Thank you.
No worries.
That's okay. Go.
It's statistics, anything.
Yeah.
Councillor Swifty.
Well, I was going to comment on the road maintenance one. I mean, it's large. I think it's largely been covered, but I mean, just to kind of emphasise, it's not exactly potholes. I mean, Jez has shared the government methodology, but also it's of classified roads. It's not there, and of course, an awful lot of the roads have the worst potholes are on the unclassified and estate networks, so they don't count within that. I think also if you look at the comparative figures, across councils generally, this may not be the most robust indicator because it does seem to fluctuate a lot from year to year for individual councils, which I find a little bit strange. I think the important point in terms of what we're doing about it, the capital for highways maintenance, I mean, it was cut last year, I have to say, by the government, but over the next 2 or 3 years, it's being rolled into a bigger funding scheme. The city, I can't get all the initials right, but it's something like the City Region Sustainable Transport Fund, or some mixture of those names and initials. And currently the West Yorkshire bid is looking for a substantial increase in the amount that's available for highways capital, which will obviously be very good news if it's agreed. But that's still being negotiated between Wicker and the Department for Transport. But you know, I certainly hope we will see an increase in that area, because clearly the need is there. And I think there's been too much attention in the past on kind of pots of money for fixing potholes, and actually a lot of our roads, they don't need potholes filling, they need proper lengths resurfacing, which needs a slightly better funded capital program. I think the other point just picked up that's not been answered, Megan asked about the inspection. I think that's and I'm afraid I get it wrong now, whether it's still called the Youth Offending Team or now probably called the Youth Justice Service, but whichever one it is, there has been an Ofsted inspection. I understand the letter from that takes some time to prepare, so we're not likely to get the official result probably until post-election because of Purda getting in the way, but we will get that in due course. I think other things I was going to say, I think Sylvia's already covered.
Thank you. Right, I don't see any further items that members are wishing to raise. We've had a very good discussion on this. There is a lot to discuss, I know, and it covers a lot of areas. If there's anything, I know Jez will pick up any issues for further actions, etc. Is anything particular you want to flag up to report back to Cabinet or not? I think we've had explanations for most of the areas that's been spoken on. So if not, can I ask members if we receive the report? Okay. Thank you. I'll move on then to the presentation on how the council communicates with the public. This is something I think we've been looking forward to having a look at, how our comms teams and others communicate across Calderdale and wider. So is it Lucy? It's am I right? Is it Lucy? It's going to present this to us.
That's right. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
If I can just share my screen.
Yeah. Yeah, fine. Please carry on.
Thank you. Okay, so can everyone see that? Has that worked?
Yeah, that's great, Lucy.
Yeah,
thank
works
you.
For me. Yeah.
Right, thank you. Well, thanks for this opportunity to come and talk to you about the communication service for the council and how we do communicate with the public. I've got probably about 20 minutes worth of slides. I'll try not to go too quickly, but there's quite a bit to cover. And then I've put a section at the end for questions, but clearly if there are any questions in between times, just let me know. So we're a smallish team of 18 FTE, but 19 people in total. And between us, we cover a range of different specialisms outlined there. So we have film and social media. Social media is shared across a small core of the team. We've got the press office, and then we have a team of campaign officers and designers who work together to develop the campaigns. It's worth noting that 7 of these posts are actually externally funded, so they are a dedicated resource for each of the areas covered there. So, for example, the next chapter covers the regeneration across Calderdale and is funded by the Combined Authority. The dedicated flooding post there, funded via the Flood Board, I believe, with money from DEFRA. Place development is quite a new post to us, which has been funding some of the COVID recovery money. Active Calderdale, I'm sure you're all familiar with, was funded from the local delivery pilot from Sport England. And the Inspire programme is a current recruitment process at the moment, and is a post which will sit jointly with the communications team and business and skills, working on improving the employment chances of people currently unemployed and wanting to improve their skills. So there's quite a long list of what I would say is the role of the council comms team, a selection there. So predominantly we're here to support the priorities of the administration, and that's the services that deliver to the 3 priority areas, so reducing inequalities, tackling climate change, and building thriving, resilient towns. But there's also kind of a practical element to what we do. So a lot of the council services, we can communicate to residents and businesses how to access those services and more information about them. We also do public information and emergency communication. So this is the things that people need to know. For example, in the time of flooding, we've got an out of hours on call rota that makes sure that there's cover there throughout the year 24/7, just in the event of an incident. Some of what we do is straightforward marketing. So there are services that generate income for the council, and I'll touch on those in a bit more detail later. In the pandemic world in particular, we've spent quite a bit of time on internal communications. We're quite a dispersed workforce now, and there are a lot of changes, and it's really important, just as we do external communications, that we talk to each other. E-call is the main mechanisms that we do, and all members are included in that as part of our internal comms. Health and wellbeing, both for internal and external purposes. So we have our Wellbeing Wednesday e-call, but also there's a lot of links with public health and Active Calderdale, supporting messages for national campaigns too, and raising the profile of Calderdale, which is last but definitely not least. It's shouting about how fantastic Calderdale is beyond the borders of Calderdale. So then we come to the why. Why are we doing this? Why do we spend our time on this? And I've touched on some of that already, but probably one of the most important things is recognising the role of local authority within the borough. So we are one of the leaders in the place. When I first joined the council, a number of calls we get were based from the media, based on a misunderstanding of what the council does. I think they think we do quite a lot of things that we don't actually do, but as well as all the things that we do. So we're clearly seen as one of the points for of leadership in the place. I can see that Councillor Megan Swift has got a hand up.
Yeah, I'll catch you up, Lucy. It's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
It would be best at the end of the presentation if we can.
Right, okay. There's also about reflecting on the sense of community and also civic pride. There's a lot to be proud of about Calderdale, not just that the council does, but about the place. The excitement, for example, of all the Marvel filming in the Peace Hall. And that's something that I think it's important that the council celebrates. Some of it is led by us, some of it is about just sharing those messages that our partners put out to get a real sense of identity for Calderdale. As I've already mentioned, one of the things that we do is about public safety. Not just the incidents there, but also around the COVID messaging we've been doing a lot of recently. The next on the list is engaging with democracy, which it probably, in terms of importance, it should be at the top. We are here because we support our communities, we work for our communities. Part of the role of a council is to encourage people to engage in that process, because you're making decisions that affect communities, and communities are very well placed to comment on those processes too. They're the experts in their area and we work for them. We have health and wellbeing, which I've covered already, and I'll show examples of that later in the presentation. Jumping ahead to recruitment and retention, linking in with the sense of civic pride, but also pride in the council itself. If we sing about the areas where we have expertise, if we shout beyond the borders of Calderdale, particularly, for example, in our trade press and in the awards that we enter, it can give a real sense of purpose about who we are and an identity, which will encourage people to come and work for us and to stay working for us. It's that external recognition that we're doing a good job, that Calderdale's an interesting place that will attract people with ambition, that they share our aspiration. And again, sharing information with colleagues is critical, particularly during the pandemic. So it's probably not the entire list of why we do what we do, but that hopefully gives a flavour of the breadth of it. Now, when we're working on communicating our messages, the starting point is to talk to a service about what we want to do. So we'll get a brief from a service, whether that's fostering, whether that's communicating the budget, whether that's Active Calderdale. The starting point is always to understand what the service wants to achieve. Part of that is definitely working out who their audience is. So who is it that they want to receive the message, and what do they want to do when they've heard that message, and what is the best way of reaching them to, because different audiences will be looking at different elements of what we call as channels. Channels are just a way of reaching people, so the list there is not exclusive, but it will give you a good idea of the type of things that activities that we do. And it'll be a mix and match too. So depending on whether for example, if it was fostering, we might consider doing a press briefing if there's something newsworthy to say. Out of home advertising, because when people drive or walk around the towns, they'll see these things, and it's a drip feed of awareness. So people see it in a number of different places. Social media is a key one for us. Because we know that a lot of people will use it, and it's very measurable too. We can usually see what impact we have. So, for example, with the current budget consultation, we've done a media briefing, we've done with the courier, we've done press release, we've done an e-call message, so all internal staff are aware of it. And next week we're planning to do a Facebook Live, so there's an opportunity to have a two-way conversation, so people can message with questions to cabinet members and they'll get a response live. So that's just a whistle-stop tour of the channels that we use. As I say, there will be more that we could have included, but that gives you a sense of where we go. And then breaking down some examples of the things that we do. So there's the obvious council tax and budget consultation that's currently underway. Last autumn we had Storm Arwen, different type of emergency response, because it was the power lines that went down rather than, unfortunately, sometimes it's a flooding event, so a different response there. We've seen the COVID-19 comms that we did, and for those of you on the board last year, did quite a detailed cover for the first year of the pandemic. We also respond to media inquiries, and this is part of helping to engage with democracy. Journalists can ask us anything, and we try to give transparent, open, honest responses to the deadline, because we believe that's an important way of helping people understand the role of the council. And if there's a particular subject that they want to know more about on a particular issue, it's really important way of telling the media and therefore the readership and the council's position on a particular issue. And that's also reflected in the work around the cabinet papers. So with cabinet reports, we'll often do press releases to try and boost that interest in what the cabinet's doing, what the council's planning for the next few months. And then finally, statutory consultations, which we do frequently. And that's, again, an invitation for our communities to get involved and tell us what they think about the question at hand. So here are some examples that I've classified as public information. The top left is the work that we're doing currently on the council tax. So there's an infographic there which shows for every £1 spent where it goes on public services. There's some examples of flooding and COVID. And then on the left-hand side, there's an example of current consultation that we're running with Combined Authority on the plans for the Halifax railway station. These are followed by examples of some of the press coverage we've had where we've done briefings either on flooding or COVID. So then I mentioned earlier about marketing. So this is either where the council's generating income or there are savings that we can help to support. The fostering is one of our most important services, and we work with the fostering team to recruit foster carers. As we know that for some looked after children, this gives the best outcome. So we'll do regular fostering campaigns for them based on the key messaging, as I said earlier, and which target audience. So if there's a particular type of people that fostering team wants to target in this particular campaign, then we'll work through that with the team and develop the campaign accordingly. Sports membership is another one where we tend to have regular seasonal campaigns that we know that New Year, people have New Year's resolutions. So there's currently a campaign to encourage people to sign up. With markets, they're a fantastic part of our local community and give real distinctive quality to our towns. We're in the process there of developing, we regularly promote the market service, but we're also in the process now of developing a campaign to encourage the recruitment of market traders. It's a really fantastic opportunity for someone to set up a small business with less of the risk than if they had to take on a bigger establishment from the start. So that's something that will launch shortly. And then we have the Calderdale Adult Learning, which is self-explanatory. Museums and the Victoria Theatre are part of our fantastic cultural offer. Now, I'll move on to a slide that shows you some examples of that, but I first wanted to play you a little snippet from the pantomime promotional advert, if you like. It's not the whole thing because the whole thing's quite a bit longer for the time available. But if we just have a go at playing this now, we'll just give you a little taste of one of the things we did. It does take a minute to load. Oh no, I'm not sure my bandwidth can cope. I might have to stop that, but you've got the link in your presentation.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can get back. Ooh. I don't know where my, let's see if I can bring back my slide. Yes, there we are. So here are some examples of some of the other design literature that we've created as well. So cultural offer with Gentleman Jack and Anne Lister, amazing opportunity there to raise the profile of Calderdale, and hoping to return to this when the new series is out. The top right, you can see some of our fostering campaign there. Bottom left is Victoria Theatre. Bottom right is an example of one of the bits of PR that we've done to support the recent fashion exhibition at Bankfield Museum. And then bottom right is the examples of the sports campaigns that we're doing to encourage membership. So before Christmas, there was a pre-Christmas treat yourself to an early present, and then further just above that is the 2022 offer. Along the top is some of the Calderdale adult learning examples, and then bottom left is some of the markets, an example from the markets campaign. So the example on the right is the promotion of what a great place and how colourful our markets are. The bottom left is the example of the trader campaign, which is close to launch now. Now, one of the most important things that we do is work with our services and in turn our communities to change some of the things that either they want to change or become an issue. So the 5 big things is around COVID, and there's a lot of community engagement by public health about how we word things and how we get the messages across, because we really are not wanting to tell people. This is about working with people on what's the best way of conveying these messages. That is particularly so with Active Calderdale, because there's been a lot of work by public health to talk to communities about what are the barriers to them exercising more, being more active. So a lot of learning there, and they're working with communities to provide them with the tools that they need so that they can do that in a way that they're comfortable with. So it's not about saying that everyone needs to go to gym sessions, because we know that doesn't work for everyone. It's being active in the way they're comfortable with. So particularly in that case, there's an ongoing dialogue with communities, and we're part of that, because that's how we develop the campaigns. Climate change is one that's obviously ongoing. We have launched our leadership campaign, which is about what Calderdale Council is doing to address climate change. And I've got some examples of the campaign on the next slide. But it's also then going to be about how we all as individuals can help to mitigate some of the climate change and reduce our impact on the planet. And then finally, from a few years ago, actually, is the Don't Look About campaign, which was created because our communities were complaining about levels of litter and fly tipping, and we worked with them to understand how we could try and address that too. So here are some examples of the campaigns that I've spoken about. I'm sure the COVID one is familiar to all of you, but at the middle and to the right is the campaign on Path to Zero, which is the council's response to climate declaration. And that launched just after COP26 in the autumn. On the right-hand side, we've got some examples of Active Calderdale, which is, as I say, it's trying to remove barriers and understand what it is that people feel comfortable doing to exercise and how we can encourage them to be active more often. And in the middle, some of the work we've done on litter picking and cleaning up Calderdale. And then finally, raising the profile of Calderdale. So Vision 2024 is something that's led by the council, but it's a collective partnership campaign, and it's creating an identity and expressing a set of values that we have with the 5 themes of talented and resilience, kindness, enterprising, distinctiveness. And it's one of those things that help people. It's an expression of how the community sees itself, and we do see it reflected in things like when communities come together during flooding or during Star Island. It's also something that we can talk about our aspirations for where we want to be in 2024, which is useful when we're doing some recruitment, because it explains the ambitions that we have for Calderdale and also for the council. So it helps with that conversation. We've got a direction that we're following and what we want, where we want to be, what we want to achieve. The next chapter is about the investment regeneration of Calderdale, but it is also talking to that wider audience. It's saying that Calderdale is changing. We're getting huge investment. It's not just from the combined authority, it's an umbrella term. So some of the future High Street and Towns Fund would fit under that, for example, and the new leisure centre. And following from that, we have the Think You Know Halifax campaign, which is about there's a lot of work that's going to be going on in Halifax Town Centre, and in the short term that may be perceived as there's quite a lot of change happening in quite a short space of time, but the campaign is to deliver the overall aspiration of things will be better once this is done. It'll be it'll retain all the amazing bits of Halifax, all the lovely architecture, for example, but actually when you're visiting, because things like the station will be improved, the bus station's improved, all the future high street money has been invested, it'll actually be a better experience to visit. And it's that visionary idea that in the short term there may be some roadworks, but overall the benefits will far outweigh the disruption that it causes in the very short term. And then finally awards, which help us. Every year we apply for awards, particularly the MJ and the LGC, which are our sector awards. And partly that is because it gives us the independent endorsement and recognition. So it isn't us shouting about how amazing we are as a borough or our particular services are. It's something that an external audience is saying that we measure, how we measure up against other authorities. And that can be particularly useful again in recruitment, because if we've got a really strong team, then anyone who's maybe at the start of their career and very ambitious in that particular area will seek to come to Calderdale. It puts us on the map and makes sure that people are aware of us. And again, there's some examples here of the Think You Know Halifax and the vision. And in the bottom centre, there's an article there which appeared in the MJ Municipal Journal around our response to the climate emergency. So that's quite a speedy tour of what we do. If I try and stop sharing now. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, can I say thank you on behalf of the board for such a comprehensive presentation, and it's certainly given an insight into the huge range that you cover in communications. It's some of the areas, it's really good to be reminded about just what you cover in there. I know Councillor Megan Swiss wanted to come in. Could I just say that I know if Councillor Evans had been here, I just want to mention one thing. I think you may have already mentioned it to yourselves, but on communication, particularly the wider use of if I pronounce it right, infographics, which I think some of these are really useful. I know you said, and it's covered here, that these are covered regarding budget information, using infographics to make things a lot, I don't say simpler, but more clearer to people, just what these issues are. But I just wonder if it's just restricted to social media, and that I know it's important to social media, but to that area, and is it reaching everyone it was intending to reach? So I think I'm just on behalf of the chair, I just mentioned that because I'm sure he would have done that. And just on the lighter note, just on the Borough Market, I did notice the in the pictures on that the lady holding a large joint of meat is from the butchers I've used for many years. it's really good to see that the borough market's been flagged up, and I hope we can see, increased use of that, and on its programme of hopefully of attracting more, particularly more younger people there. So thank you very much for that. And there's a number of questions now. Members wanted to speak. Councillor Megan Swift, you were up earlier on.
Yeah, I just put it up so it was there. I didn't have to keep thinking about it. Person, as Bob says, thank you very much for that presentation. There were some bits of it that I'd forgotten about, and seeing it in this format was very helpful. The improvement in your part of the direct has come on amazingly well. When I first got on, I'm not even sure that we have Facebook, but I don't know. But it was all bog standard, and you could nail it. First paragraph, second paragraph, third, and you could work out which order anything was going to go in. So some of the things I've seen recently have been really good. And some of the things around new projects and some of the artwork that gets done, I can't say that I'm not pleased with it. I am. It's amazing. And now can I remember what I was going to ask about? Oh, yeah, I remember now. The market. The market should be one of our jewels. It isn't. I went to the market working party, and I described it as sad, which I was relieved that when John came to speak, that he referred to it as sad. So there's now the money got, as far as I understand it, to do some of the work. But it needs quite a lot of work doing. And I can't see, this is my bugbear, sorry, I can't see how people will want to go in an upgraded market if we still have a precinct which is dirty and full of pigeons. And I don't think it's dirty at the beginning of the day, but, people sit on the benches and they throw the food and things. And it's grotty by the end of the day. And nobody's to blame except, well, pigeons and people who feed them. So can I feed that in, please? And I'll go away now.
Right. Well, I just thought, being a regular user of the market, that it has things, numbers seem to have improved a bit, and some of the improvements that's been made seem to be having some effect. But I do appreciate the concerns that you've mentioned, Councillor Swift. Let's just hope things can move on that. Councillor Porritt, I think, was next.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, thank you very much for that report. It was really interesting. I'm really interested actually in clearly the massive range of work that the Communications Department does across so many different media, and you've got a lot of different. You're wearing a lot of different hats and trying to reach a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. And I was just wondering if there is a way that you manage to measure the success of your campaigns, and how that then feeds in to your future work, and how that sort of develops across the department.
Am I okay to answer that, Chair?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, yeah, that is something that is one of the challenges, I would say. And it's something that we're going through a process now of reviewing, because some of it is easier than others. So using social media is very traceable. You can measure, the analytics are built in, so you can see what impact you're having on engagement. For other things, it's a bit harder. So we rely on services to tell us what impact we've had. So for example, with fostering, you would ask, how many phone calls we've generated, how many contacts have been generated, and then what route they'd found us from. But it is one of the areas that I want to look at in more detail in the coming months, because we've had a change of personnel, and I think it's an opportunity for me to step back and think about, what changes can we make, and that is one of the things that I think we could become better and slicker at. And as I say, we've had a few new people join the team too, and I'm thinking that they've probably got more experience of evaluation that they can bring as well. So we are in the process of reviewing that. And it is something that I do want to look at, because I think we probably are missing a trick sometimes. Some things like media coverage are more complicated, because then I don't want to be measuring column inches. I'm more interested in sentiment there, and that depends on the particular circumstances. So I'm in the process of contacting colleagues as well from around, so partner comms colleagues, just to kind of pick their brains on what they do and what trying to develop some best practice. So yes, it's a good question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Press.
Yeah, I mean, the classic way, Lucy, the classic way, as you know, of measuring success in the public relations industry was always traditionally to count up the column inches and do a costing, a sort of cost benefit analysis. So you'd work out how much that advertising would have cost you in the national and regional media. That's the old-fashioned way they used to do it. For those of you who don't know, my colleagues in the Labour group do. I've spent all my working life as a journalist, and I still actually do work as a journalist. And when I was in cabinet, I probably gave Lucy a pretty hard time with the press releases and stuff. So I am sorry about that, Lucy, but it was only because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I always felt, and I think it would be good. I think it'd be good to see comms doing more the bread and butter stuff around fly tipping and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's great. But I actually think there's a lot more you could be doing to reduce inequalities. There's a lot of people out there who don't use social media for a start. They don't use Twitter and they don't use Facebook. And a lot of those people are not aware maybe of what is available from the council. We ran a campaign a few years ago, which was extremely successful, around claiming discretionary housing payments. And it was very simple. It was a photograph and it was a contact number and it was one line. As I recall, it was very, very simple campaign. And the measure of the success was we went from actually ending up at the end of the year underspending on the budget we got from the government and giving money back to the government. We went from that to actually spending our entire allocation from the government to help some of our most low income families, and that to me is the kind of thing that we need to be seeing more of. We need people to be aware of what they can get, the help and the support that's out there, because you actually speak to people, they are not aware of the things that can be done. So I'd like to see, if I'm honest, I'd like to see more being done in that kind of direction, because that also ties in with our Vision 2024. Having said that, I think you do a marvellous job. You've got a very small budget. You haven't got, I say I've been a journalist all my working life, but when I started out, your comms department would have had 3 times as many people and probably a budget that would have been 10 times bigger. So under very straitened circumstances, I think you do a fantastic job. So I'd just like to see you doing a little bit more around those kinds of areas where I feel we could be getting to reach more people and beyond social media to other kinds of campaigns.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Swift.
Sorry, Charles, I was going to wait till any member finished in case there's anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Sutherland.
Thank you, Chair. Just with the comments on the market, I thought I wanted to add, I think there's been some rather excellent events that have gone on in the market. And I think that they've really cut through in terms of people talking about them, and people in the community having an interest. And I know a lot of my residents went, and my own kids won't stop talking about veg babies. I'm not really sure what the whole theme was, but they've been obsessed ever since. But it really seemed to work quite well, and it got a lot of people in town talking. So I just thought I'd add that in there, because I know we're all passionate about the market, but it's worth recognising when something has worked really quite well. So I know you do a lot of other things as well, Lucy. So congratulations on all you're doing, like others have said.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Councillor Sutherland. Yeah. Any further? Councillor Cook.
I don't know if you can see me or hear me. Sorry, my internet's not that fantastic at the minute. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, yes, I can see you.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. The question I had is, how do you select campaigns? Your campaigns. I noticed there's a lot on climate change, and that's fantastic. But I'm just wondering how you pick your lines of thing above another. Is that set by a meeting with the cabinet, or with the directors, the directorate heads? I just wanted to how you determine your sort of work, your agendas. Thanks.
Am I okay to come in, Chair?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just got distracted for a second. Yeah, by all means.
Thank you. Yes, it's a combination of both. So we have the cabinet priorities, which the three mentioned previously, so reducing inequalities, tackling climate change, and building strong and resilient towns. And from that, we work out which services are, all the services would have a claim to say that they deliver those, but it's trying to select which are the most important because we are a small team. And then, yes, getting that approved by CLT and by Cabinet. I have to say it's an overdue process because the previous year it's been pretty much COVID, and I'm at the point where I'm developing that list. But yeah, it's really important that we do get approval from CLT and Cabinet so that we are focusing the resources that we do have on those areas. Clearly, where we've got the externally funded posts, they are already dedicated, so it's already established what areas they will be delivering on, and they will then just deliver those. But they're things like the next chapter and flooding, and active Calderdale, they're always going to be a priority for the council if they're externally funded. That's a recognition, I think, of the priority that they give. So yes, I suppose it's a short answer to your question.
Great, many thanks. Yeah. So is the final wording approved by Cabinet as well? I'm just wondering, once you sort of release something, would they be able to be so, if you were to write that?
Sorry, could you say that again? It just broke.
It just went.
I'm just wondering.
Sorry. Go on, Councillor. You just went offline. It just went quiet.
The final wording of some of the campaign. Oh, sorry. I'll say that again. I'm just wondering, does the final sign off or approval get made by Cabinet as well? So if they were to see the wording of a particular campaign, could they say, would you change that wording, to something else? Are they allowed to have that input, or how does it work?
So campaigns, we do get approved, but I'm not sure that we would always get, it depends on the campaign. I'm not sure that it would always go to Cabinet level just because we do quite a lot of campaigns, but I can give, if there's a specific campaign, I can give you details of the approval process for that.
That'd be great. Yeah, I just wanted to know how it works. Yeah. So that's fantastic. Yeah. Thanks.
I'll bring Councillor Swift in.
Yeah, if I can help a little on that. I mean, it does, as Lucy said, it does kind of depend on the campaign and the topic. And I suppose broadly, it's probably consistent within the same way that, you will have operational decisions that are taken by frontline staff or team leaders, and more significant ones that are signed off at kind of a chief officer level, and some are signed off at political level. And I guess in a sense, it's a bit the same with comms. Clearly Cabinet members are not going to, at trivial level, we're not going to sign off every tweet that the comms team put out. But you would expect that major campaigns, it's not even necessarily a case of signing off, but we want, we'd want to be comfortable that they're consistent with our overall priorities. I mean, the thing that nearly always is signed off by Cabinet members is the final wording of press releases. And again, I think you'd expect that because they're a very public statement of what the council is saying. I just wanted to pick up two things. but at the other, I suppose if you took as an example, like because I was going to talk a bit about the embedded comms people in various projects. So if you take, for example, the regular comms that come out about something like the A629 scheme, or that would rarely get anywhere near a cabinet member unless there's a kind of a significant development or a controversial issue in there. So so I think you've got to see it in the line of the way other decisions are approved at an appropriate level to the scale of decision. That was just the thing I want to pick up. I do think the kind of embedded comms in some of the major projects has been really successful, and I think you see the difference also then when you have something like shall we say a major problem that involves a road being closed for a few months without naming one, because I don't want to set hairs running or we'll get into irrelevant issues, where you don't have somebody embedded to do the regular comms in the same way. You see the difference, don't you? And I think that's been really successful and really emphasises that most of comms is not to do with political comms at all. It is about keeping our residents informed and aware of what's happening, and obviously the work around flooding. And also some of that, of course, picks up the point Susan, Councillor Press was making, that it isn't just about social media and online things as well, and that sometimes actually going back to traditional newsletters and print matters too. And that's harder for us to do sometimes, but we do try and keep the balance right. And you'll be aware that at a number of points during COVID, we've written to residents. We produce things like the winter-wise booklet and so on. Obviously, social media has huge advantages because of cost of distribution, but it doesn't get everybody, and we do need to continue to use more traditional means.
Thanks. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I don't see anyone else wishing to speak. I do take the last point up, Councillor Swift, that I think that I raised when I mentioned infographics, that it is making sure that we try, because not everybody uses social media, and it's trying to get that wider spread to reach as many possible people in residents in Calderdale as you can who aren't traditional users of things like Facebook, etc. And so I know that's something that you're working on all the time, I'm sure, in communications. So anything else from members at all? If not, can I thank you very much for your very interesting and wide-ranging presentation, and I'm sure you'll pick up all the comments and questions that's been made tonight. And we'll perhaps look in the work programme later on if we'd like to ask you back at some future date just to give us an update on things. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. If we could move on then to the cabinet draft budget proposals. I think we want to take these in, if you like, in two ways. We need to look at the ones that's particularly relevant to strategy and performance, and we've had those highlighted, and obviously members have looked at the reports on those, and perhaps we could look at those first. Have Councillor Swift, it's going to just report back from Cabinet on those, and then just look, we've only had it today, the follow-up information from the other scrutiny boards on their examination and comments regarding the budget proposals. So if I could just ask to start with then, if it could just, I think Councillor Dacre, Councillor Swift, we've got a list in front of us and we know what the areas are particularly relevant to SNP. So if I could just ask if either of you'd like to come in and just report on this so we can ask any questions we need to.
Well, thanks, Bob. I mean, I was going to make some fairly general comments about the budget as a whole, which I can perhaps do now as a context, and let Sylvia say a bit more about the specific strategy ones. So just briefly, I mean, people will have picked up the headlines that it proposes a 2% council tax rise just under and a 1% social care precept, which, goes interestingly enough, now is still below the current rate of inflation. That secondly, we're putting forward a 3-year budget, although it's important to recognise that the government has only given us a 1-year settlement. So there are some significant uncertainties about what happens in year 2 and 3. But I think getting back to that 3-year planning is really important. And you'll see in a number of the savings proposals, not so much under strategy and performance, but in other areas, that there are significant savings in year 2 and 3, which will only happen if that planning work starts now. The overall priorities remain dealing with the pandemic and its aftermath, keeping children safe and retaining our very low case rates in social work caseloads, and the investment in preventive services. And I think we've seen from some of the social care challenges elsewhere why that's so important, and budgeting for the growing costs and demand in adult social care, and really, protecting those areas, dealing with those areas doesn't leave a huge amount of room for manoeuvre. So what we are able to accommodate in terms of change does depend on careful management and finding opportunities for savings elsewhere. But just to highlight quickly across the areas, the key priorities where there's areas of growth include the providing the revenue costs for the new swimming pool and leisure centre refurbishment, supporting the waste service to get back on track, invest, and then things that need to be done, investing some of our key buildings to make sure that they're safe for staff and public, backing our strategic plan for North Halifax, and some of the ones I think Sylvia will say a bit more about in terms of strengthening the IT infrastructure. And we touched earlier on the investment in the planning service. So that's a very quick headlines, and perhaps Sylvia might want to say a little bit more specifically about the areas within strategy and performance's responsibilities.
Yeah. Okay.
Pardon me. Yes, thank you. Yes, so if I just start with the investments, which I hope I've gone backwards and forwards through this, trying to check I've got the ones that are marked blue, so I hope I've got it right. But first of all is in investments is the ICT and digital proposals. And of course, really, it won't surprise you to hear me say that the most important of these is the strengthening of our cyber security capacity. It's not just the council itself, but all of our residents who would be quite disastrously impacted if we were to suffer a successful cyber attack. So it's absolutely crucial that we invest in this area, even though it's not something that you can actually see on a daily basis. And equally, we have a lot of systems which the council has developed for dealing with all sorts of interactions that residents and businesses have with us as a council. Those systems are getting old, they need to be renewed, and we need to look into that. So that's another area where we need to get on with that, because we can't afford, you all know from your own computing experiences that software gets out of date and you have to update it. And we can't have residents and businesses not being able to interact with us. And of course, everyone wants an adequately staffed service desk when they need IT help. And again, because the council is now a digital council, it's absolutely essential that members and the officers and employees of the council aren't stuck waiting for an answer from the service desk while they either have no access to systems or where they're struggling with a particular issue. So again, I think that will make, that investment will just make the council run better to the benefit of those inside and outside. And of course, the last bit of that is the digital transformation, where we just need a bit more capacity to be able to look at that, because again, we are a digital council, we need to do things digitally in the future. So the other investment was just touched on by Councillor Swift, and it's the health and safety critical investment in our estate, our buildings. And again, I'm sure everyone would agree that we need our buildings to be safe, both for employees and for, that in some cases where there are other users of those buildings. It is essential work. It can't wait any longer, and the risks of leaving it are too great. So those are the two investment areas that I think were highlighted for this panel or committee. The savings The first is the service review of business data and intelligence, and again, it's something that goes on without most of us knowing anything about it. But the council does collect enormous amounts of data, both to help it run the council, but also in its dealings with businesses, and it can be of assistance to those businesses. During COVID, clearly things changed. Some of the routine work wasn't done and other data had to be collected that we hadn't maybe collected before. And I think that led to the thought that actually we perhaps do need to change what we do in the future. What data do we need? What can we get from elsewhere? What technologies can we use to help us gather data more efficiently? And do we need the amount of staff there or the level of the staff that we currently have? So there are risks that are outlined on the form in relation to that. We don't want to end up in a position where we haven't got the capacity to get the data and intelligence that we need, but so that will have to be kept under review, but it has the capacity to make us more efficient. The second one is in relation to the contributions to the West Yorkshire pension scheme. That it's a marvellous saving for us in many ways, because it has no consequences, in that it's simply because the pension scheme is in such a good position that the actuaries were agreeable to contributions from the constituent councils reducing. The risk with it is that we don't know what the performance of the scheme will be in the future, and if it was to the performance falters, then we might not be able to have that saving again in future years. And finally, parish and town councils. There's two elements to that. One is that the councils get a grant from us, and the other is that we are suggesting that we would stop subsidising them in terms of the council tax reduction scheme, as in effect we no longer get any subsidy for that from the government, or we don't get the same amount of subsidy for that from the government. We've continued to support parish and town councils entirely to allow them to deal with that, and we're proposing that we wouldn't continue to effectively protect them from that in the future. It is difficult for that, and there's the thing I'd say immediately is there is a consultation to go through before that can happen. That's why it doesn't come into effect in the first year. And there's already been discussions in the liaison meeting, I think yesterday, in relation to issues that might arise over that. I think, to some degree, for instance, particularly in relation to the grants, there is an issue of fairness across the borough, in that those are grants that are given only to those areas which have parish or town councils, and there are many areas that don't. So finally, the only other thing I was going to mention, which I think was highlighted in blue, was in relation to the general fund balances. You'll be aware that a decision was made some time ago that we would maintain those at or above 5 million. And you'll also see that it's proposed that we will use some of those this year, and I think it's in year 3, as a contribution towards effectively a deficit that at the moment we think there might be. But what is still the case is that we'd still be keeping the balances above the level that we'd agreed that they would keep them at. So we say that that is a low risk strategy, because we are sticking to the limits that we'd set ourselves. So I think those were all the points that really arise from savings and investment for S&P, unless I've missed something.
Okay, I think that's well covered. Thank you very much, Councillor Dacre. Got a couple of members wishing to speak on this. Councillor Porritt.
I hadn't actually put my hand up yet. I'm planning to, but I think Councillor Press has her hand up already.
No, I saw a hand. I saw a hand.
Probably just scratching my head.
A white hand, not a yellow one, actually. Right. Councillor Press. I've seen Councillor Press as well. Yeah, Councillor Press.
Yeah, it was me. Yeah.
No, I know. I've seen both of you. Thank you.
Yeah. I was only going to say that just on the council tax rise, that obviously we all know that council tax rises are never going to be popular, but we also know that most of our council tax, I'm sure that cabinet members can refresh me with the latest figure, but the last time I looked, 70% of our council tax actually goes to pay for adult health and social care, something like that. And I don't think that will have changed significantly. So whatever's left from that, something like 30% has to go to pay for everything else in the borough. And that's as true now as it was several years ago. So we're still struggling. But the reason we have to put the council tax up is because that's the only means we have, which the government has given us to help fund adult health and social care. But I just wanted to make the point really that that we are still doing our very level best to protect our most vulnerable in Calderdale, who still pay far less in council tax. I think it's something like 11%, and in some areas 15% less. People on low incomes and benefits only pay 19% of council tax, which I think is something that we've stuck to, despite there's been quite a bit of pressure over the years to put that up, but we haven't. So I just want to say that I think this is a fair budget, and it's under the circumstances it's the best. It's the best we can do in circumstances which continue to be very difficult indeed, especially with the cost of living. The cost of living crisis with inflation at 5%. So these are very difficult times, but I think the cabinet are doing their best, and I'd like to. Obviously, I'll be supportive of this budget.
Right, thank you, Councillor Press. Councillor Porritt.
Thank you, Chair. I also want to take the opportunity to thank Nigel for preparing what I believe is his last budget report before retirement. When you can go and stop panicking about what we're all up to. Obviously looking at the usual, round of challenges and savings and difficulties, but also really noticing that we've actually got the opportunity for some investment at the moment, which is all quite exciting. But I just want to seek reassurance that we are going to be putting social value at the forefront of how that investment is going to be handled. And I don't know whether it's a question for this evening or whether I've got the right people in the room, but really looking at what kind of social value that would be. Are we going beyond sort of geographic location of suppliers and contractors, or are we able to bring in more sort of social value elements? We were discussing earlier about the youth unemployment and whether there's opportunities for apprenticeships and that kind of thing. And I appreciate this is a budget discussion, but really just to sort of take away the importance of putting those sort of community considerations at the heart of how we're going to spend this bit of money that we're managing to invest. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I'll just take the questions and ask Councillor Deaker to respond. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, good evening. Just wanted to ask a question about how the savings are calculated, because they have to be costed savings. I realise that, and I realise that Nigel Broadbent's department will have, done work into that. But how were they actually picked? So, for example, if you go online, you can download. Members of the public can download for any particular month how much the council spends on suppliers. So if you go and look at December, for example, and download that for last year, December 2021, you'll see there's more than £24 million spent by the council on suppliers, and it gives a list of every single supplier and the amount spent on them. Like, for example, in that particular month, I pulled up, there's more than 300,000 sent to, so this is not private information, it's available to the public. It was sent to Wakefield Council, over 300 grand in December. There's obviously no explanation there as to why that money was sent. So I don't know that as a councillor, and members of the public don't know that either. I'm not sure if they're allowed to know, but the point I'm trying to make is, have the council drilled down through sort of every expense and said which of these are essential, which of these are non-essential, which of these can we actually reduce? What do we need to do to make savings in that way? Or is it just a matter of, you just sort of work through what the cabinet propose, or does it come from your own work at your department, Nigel? So I really just wanted to know how those savings actually appear, how they've been passed on to the cabinet, and how they appear in the budget. If you can maybe answer that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. Anyone else want to, before I bring in Councillor Swift and Councillor Dacre? I just wanted to make a couple of comments, just general ones. Firstly, just say I do understand, and it's in the reports that with this being the fourth one-year settlement in a row, just how difficult it is, not just this council but all councils in a game preparing the budget. So it must be very difficult in planning when year after year we can only plan with 1 year's financial settlements. And just on the provisional settlement, I don't want to get into what's going on in Westminster and at the present time, but I think I've read that we expect the final version of the local government settlement to be with the Commons for approval in late Jan or early Feb. I'm just asking if it's possible to know if that timetable's being kept without everything else that's going on in Westminster at the present time. Because it is I understand it is a provisional settlement. I know there's probably very few changes when it's approved, but at the moment we're working on a provisional settlement. So that's the comments just on the actual financial side. And I just have one comment, probably a little extended, on the growth, because it is important. It's good to see growth. We're managing to put growth in the budget. And to me, sometimes scrutinising growth is probably more important than scrutinising savings, because of course for each growth proposal we make, we've got to make sure that we've made adequate savings to cover that. And just directly, which Councillor Dacre has spoken about on ICT, the cyber growth, and again, fully aware of the comments you made and aware of the importance on this, but this is becoming a never-ending funding demand, and we're constantly having to address actions which seem to come out of date and risk returns. I've just read somewhere, I think the UK is, so I know how risky this is, the third most targeted country for cyber attack. So I know how important it is, but to me, it just looks like a black hole. It's consuming funding, not stars. It's consuming funding. Is this area, so it really is a concern. I have read today, Councillor Dacre, that I think I read it in Public Sector News when I was just checking emails, that there has been a 31.8 funding launch announced for cyber security, part of the strategy launch on this. So I don't know if that information's, I don't know just if that is right. I've seen today, obviously it could be that there is some funding directly for cyber growth coming through to the council. Just pick that up on an email from the Public Sector News today. So just with those comments, I'll see if there's anyone else. I haven't seen anyone else. I'll ask Councillor Swift, Councillor Dacre if they'd like to respond, please.
Thanks. I'll let Sylvia do the detailed stuff, particularly on IT. I suppose just saying, in response to Councillor Cook's thing about where the savings proposals come from, I suppose a couple of observations. I mean, firstly, in terms of actual budget savings, there is a list of options prepared by Nigel and CLT as a whole, which usually consists both of issues that they've identified themselves and often things that have been brought forward by political groups for savings in previous years and are costed out in that way. But I wouldn't want members to think that it's by, the budget is not by any means the only way in which the council looks for value for money. And clearly, there's a whole range of financial regulations about the way we procure things, the way we ensure that individual transactions are valued for money. And of course, a whole set of audit processes, both internal and external, which provide challenge to value for money. I mean, I guess that could almost form the topic of a report and consideration for the panel in its own right. Probably rather in more detail than perhaps you'd want to go into tonight. I think the requirement, there's the unlamented Eric Pickles who came up with this kind of requirement of the council publishing all the invoices in kind of raw form on the website every month. And I'm not sure practically it's that helpful, because you do get this list of payments without context and often without clear information about the reasons for which the payment's being made. But I'm sure those, if Councillor Cook, if you wanted to drop an email to Nigel with some more details, I'm sure he would check them and explain. It may well be to do with things like, for example, joint services, which I suspect the accounts for are managed through Wakefield, but that's just an informed guess. I think that was all the one I wanted to comment on, and Sylvia probably wants to add something on the IT and a couple of the others.
Well, just on that IT issue, I wasn't aware of that, Bob, and I think from looking at Nigel when you mentioned it, he wasn't either. I know there had been some talk last year that there would be some funding for it, but and so it may be that this has finally come, but I wasn't aware. It's going to be very welcome if it does. Nigel may have more information on whether we think there'll be a delay in the final settlement, but I think from everything he's said previously, it wouldn't be anticipated that there would be much change from the provisional one. I suppose the only other point I'd like to make in relation to Councillor Cook's queries were that the council have indeed been drilling down on every possible way of saving money for the last 12 years. That's why it's getting so difficult to find things, because there really just is not much room for manoeuvre anymore after that amount of time. And I know that 24 million sounds like a lot of money, but it's only a relatively small part of the overall budget of Calderdale. And again, as was mentioned, you could always get more details of what's going on there when you look at those contracts. But so I don't think there's anything else I would need to add, and I think Nigel is wanting to come in.
Right.
Thank you,
Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. It's just the hand doesn't appear on my screen for some reason. But just in terms of the points that were raised, clearly, if there are any particular payments that members wish me to look into, could I identify them and give members some more detail on what those payments relate to. Councillor Swift has explained the budget process. Essentially, what we do is provide a list of various savings options to each of the political groups for them to consider. These are options that are prepared by officers, by directors, based on ideas from those directors, based on previous year's ideas that have been not taken up. But those are open to each of the political groups to consider. But equally, if any group putting forward a budget proposal wants to put forward their own ideas about savings, then we would investigate those and examine them with the appropriate director. I'd have to say that on those, at the end of the day, I have a responsibility as Section 151 officer to have to sign those off as being deliverable, robust and deliverable. So that's part of my role, to ensure that whatever is put forward is actually deliverable. And in terms of the final point about cybersecurity, in the provisional settlement, there was an announcement that some grant funding would be available for cybersecurity. There was only a national figure announced, and I haven't seen a specific allocation for Calderdale yet. So If Councillor Metcalf spotted it, then well done on that. I'll be looking out for it after this meeting. But certainly we would expect some of that money, but I don't know how much at this stage. And then the final settlement hopefully will include that funding. As Councillor Dacre said, I don't anticipate at this stage any significant changes in the final settlements, but hopefully if there are any, then they will be favourable to us.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel, for that. As I say, I'm sure I'm not imagining it. I saw it on an email this afternoon from Public Sector News, so you can look that up, please. And it really will be good news if it gives us some help in this key area. And also just mention to Councillor Porritt on social value. I certainly do appreciate really the need for that, and I know that in my previous role in adults, and I did try to make sure that new commissioning and contracts were active. If we were considering new services, we actively worked on social value and requests to make sure that our requests on social value are included in future commissioning programs and contracts. So I think it applies obviously to the whole council, is that, so I'm hoping that will be picked up. And I'm sorry, Councillor Lynn, I do know you've been waiting very patiently to respond to on your budget areas. I just wanted to make sure we covered what's relevant on strategy and performance and the wider introduction from Councillor Swift, but please, and apologies for not bringing you in earlier. Councillor Swift, Councillor Lynn, she left us. Oh, doesn't seem as though she's with us. I was intending asking her to speak.
She's attempting to unmute as we speak.
Is there? Ah, right.
But frantically by the look on her face.
Yeah.
She's turned the camera off.
Sorry, Chair, can I just say you've also got Councillor Taylor and Councillor Cook with the hand raised?
I've seen them both. Thank you. I'm bringing them in next. Yeah. Councillor Lynn, are you there? Still there?
Yes, I am still there.
No.
Councillor,
sorry,
Chair,
you wanted to comment in. You wanted to address the board.
I think this is I don't, Chair. I think this is a very long meeting. I'm very happy to respond to questions, but no, and the lead has obviously been taken by Councillor Dacre and Councillor Swift. Okay. I just wanted to come to listen in on what the key issues were that strategy and performance was concerned about. So no, I'm here to listen and to take notes, but obviously to answer questions if you need me at all. Okay. But thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us tonight. I'm not sure who was first between Councillor Taylor and Councillor Cook, but I've seen Councillor Taylor first, so I'll ask him if.
It's of seniority coming in here, I expect. I'm not quite the granddad, Bob, because I think you've been here longer than I have, actually.
Yeah, we won't go into that.
You were there when I was in short trousers, so there.
Oh, thank you for that.
Just a couple of quick comments, because it is difficult. I, for those who don't know, I came back to council in '98. And between 98 and 2010, we still had to make savings even back then. We've currently had this furlough, this COVID still going on, national debt's gone. So I think we're going to be stuck with these types of budgets. I do, however, agree that it's very difficult when you've only got 1 year to work with. It doesn't get we really do need to hopefully get back to 3 years. Gives you a bit more to plan for, as I remember Nigel Broadbent saying a few times when I was on cabinet, and I know it's a while ago. Yes, on the growth, I mean, we've all had the recycling complaints or lack of, and I do understand, and again, part of the consequence is the extra tonnage with people working from home, where those pop cans used to go in the recycle tub at work, or the envelopes went in wherever for the again for the recycling. They're going in the home sacks, and it is a difficult one. I just hope the growth is enough to retain the drivers, because it's not a job I'd like to do. I'll be honest with you, driving buses for 4 years was bad enough. Never mind having to handle all that. I just hope it's enough, and I hope it does help to alleviate. Personally, I would just say let's go for a fortnightly recycling. One each. Waste, recycle, but that's just me. The other one, slightly off strategy and performance, really pleased to see growth in the planning. It's always been a difficult area. I mean, in the noughties, when I was on cabinet, we actually had more. We had a lot of regeneration schemes on the go back then, and we had a lot of people actually. Things like Action Halifax, the Lower Valley or Upper Valley schemes, we don't have those now. And planning with the local plan and all the rest that's thrown on them, retaining staff, we always used to link them years ago to neighbouring councils, so that's not a problem. So I was really pleased to see that, and congratulations to everyone put it together. I have been there, done that, and lost the hair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, hi, thanks. So I just wanted to come back on the question I had about how the savings were arrived at, because the reason I asked that question is because a claim has been made publicly that I think it might have been Council Leader Swift that said it's impossible to make any further efficiency savings. So that was the reason I was asking how that you can make that claim if you don't really know if the process by which you're calculating this or working out the savings is a little bit ad hoc, which what it seems to be the answer tonight. It's simply passed on from political groups, what they suggest, or previous years, what they suggest, but without a proper process of going through every single, I know it's a difficult one, it's a lot of work, but that shouldn't really matter. But I don't know how you can substantiate the claim it's impossible to make further efficiency savings. So that's why the reason I was asking that question. So I just wanted to come back on that and mention that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Swift.
Well, I don't recollect using the words that Councillor Cook said there. I can recall colleagues saying that it has become ever harder to find savings, and I think that's true. But again, I don't want to expand on the argument I said earlier, but I would emphasise, the budget process itself is not the only way in which challenges are made throughout the year on efficiency and value for money. And what you see in terms of the saving list often is the distillation of work that's gone on in a lot of different ways. And I'm aware of how long this meeting's gone on, but I'd be quite happy to work with Nigel about producing something rather more detailed on that. I mean, I didn't mention the early response, for example, the quarterly budget challenge sessions that take place where cabinet members sit down with directors and Nigel and kind of give each area a grilling on what's going on and why there are budget pressures there. So there are a lot of things, and you should recognise the budget process itself is a small part of what goes on in terms of the council's financial management.
Thank you for that. I think we've covered all those areas. We have the S&P Scrutiny have received the comments and recommendations, if any, from the other scrutiny boards. I know we've only just received this information today because the last scrutiny board that met was only yesterday, I think. So there's some key points being listed there. I won't go through them all. I know there's no formal recommendations, I don't think, has been tabled from another scrutiny board, but I'll bring Mike in a second just to remind us of the process that we're now, because we taking these on board from the other scrutiny boards on top of any comments and further issues we want to discuss tonight from those areas of SNP responsibilities. So do you just want to come in, Mike, on the process?
Thank you, Chair. So subject to the board's agreement, we'll pull together, myself and Fazana and Lauren will pull together a report that builds in the comments from the other scrutiny boards, the comments you've made this evening, and any recommendations you may make, and put that forward as a report from Strategy and Performance to Cabinet, and that will be considered by Cabinet on the 14th of February when it considers the whole of the consultation process. Because of the timings, we can't bring that back to the full board for approval, and with your approval as a board, we'll ask Councillor Evans and Councillor Metcalfe to sign off that report. So that's the way in which the comments and any recommendations from all four scrutiny boards will be fed back through to Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I don't know if any board members got any comment they want to make on the other scrutiny boards, key points or no recommendations at all. before we move on. If not, I do know that I think we want to flag up the importance of social value that Councillor Porritt raised tonight as well. Within that, perhaps as a comment within the report it goes through. So, am I missing anything? Is anything else we want to particularly? We've had the report back from Cabinet, the leader and Councillor Dacre. Is there anything else any member wishes to make, or can we take that on board and then this report will be on behalf of this committee and the other committees will then be sent on to Cabinet for the 14th of February? Are we all okay on that? Yep. And could I thank everyone that's come along tonight for this and other items. And if there's nothing further, I'll just move on to the Cabinet programme. Oh, sorry, the SNP programme. Is there anything to raise, Mike, on the SNP programme?
Lauren, is there anything we want to raise?
I don't think so. Just to say to members that we've got a couple of items on the agenda next time, and if there's anything that anybody would like to raise in the next few meetings, just to let myself, Councillor Metcalfe or Councillor Evans know.
Right, the work programme, yes, thank you. Yeah, we've got it. We've got copies, of course, with the information what's coming back to the next. I think the next two board meetings. Yes, yeah. Not too bad before 8 o'clock. So I wasn't expecting chairing tonight, but I just hope Councillor Evans gets his water deluge sorted out without too much damage. And like to then end the meeting and thank everyone for attending.